Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We always try to tailor these to what we know you're interested in. And right now, I think it's safe to say a lot of guys are grappling with this whole question of what it means to be a man today, especially with all the changes in relationships and society. So
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic.
it is. So that's why we're diving into Conrad Reicher's book, Lock and Lead. Have you had a chance to check it out?
I have. It's pretty thought-provoking. Riker doesn't pull any punches. He really digs into the historical and biological roots of masculinity. And I think that's what makes it so interesting. He's not just offering opinions, he's trying to understand the bigger picture.
Okay, so let's start with the historical context, because that's a big part of Reicher's argument.
Hmm.
He says that to understand the pressures men face today, we have to understand where those pressures came from.
Right. He says that the traditional gender roles, the ones that are often criticized today, actually emerged out of necessity. They weren't just arbitrary social constructs. They served a purpose.
So he's saying they work.
Basically, yeah. He uses the example of the Roman Empire. He argues that as gender roles started to blur in Roman society, it led to a decline in civic virtue, military strength, and overall social cohesion.
He's connecting the fall of Rome to gender roles.
It might sound a bit far-fetched at first, but he makes a compelling case. He argues that when men and women no longer have clear roles and expectations, it creates a kind of societal drift, a lack of direction, and that can have serious consequences.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. But of course, we have to acknowledge the progress we've made since then, right? I mean, movements like the Enlightenment and feminism have brought about some important positive changes.
Oh, absolutely. Riker acknowledges that he's not advocating for a return to the past or anything like that, but he does caution against throwing the baby out with the bathwater. He says we can't just demonize traditional roles without understanding the context in which they arose.
So it's not about going backward. It's about understanding the past so we can move forward more effectively.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key point. Riker argues that men and women, while equal in worth and deserving of equal opportunity, are biologically different. And those differences influence our strengths and tendencies.
He's not saying that men and women are the same, just that they should be treated equally.
Right. He's saying that acknowledging those inherent differences isn't about limiting anyone's potential. It's about creating an environment where everyone can thrive based on their unique strengths.
Okay, so what are some of those differences he talks about?
Well, he uses the example of testosterone and estrogen. You know how they're not just about physical development, but also influence behavior?
Yeah, I've heard that.
So he says that men with higher levels of testosterone tend to be naturally more assertive, competitive, and risk-taking. And he argues that these qualities, while sometimes problematic, were actually essential for survival in our evolutionary past.
So those traits that are sometimes labeled as toxic masculinity today actually served a purpose back then.
Exactly. Think about it. Early humans needed men who were willing to hunt dangerous animals, protect their tribe from threats, and explore new territories. Those weren't exactly jobs for the faint of heart.
That makes sense. So he's trying to reclaim those traits and put them in a more positive light.
He is, but he's also clear that he's not condoning aggression or violence. It's about understanding the roots of those traits and then channeling them constructively in the modern world.
Okay, that's interesting.
Where
But what about women? Where do they fit into this whole picture?
Well, Riker argues that women influenced by estrogen have their own unique strength, like verbal skills and nurturing qualities that were equally crucial for survival. Think about raising children, building community bonds, passing down knowledge. These were all traditionally feminine roles that were vital for the success of any society.
It sounds like he's saying that men and women have different but complementary strengths.
That's exactly it. He's pushing back against this idea of gender equality, which he sees as kind of a misguided goal. Instead, he proposes this concept of gender complementarity.
Okay, so instead of trying to make men and women the same, we should be celebrating those differences and recognizing how they contribute to a healthy society.
That's Riker's argument. He suggests that both men and women thrive when they can embrace their natural strengths, and that society benefits as a whole when those strengths are working in harmony.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm curious to hear what he has to say about toxic masculinity, because I know that's a term that gets thrown around a lot these days.
Yeah.
Does he buy into that whole idea?
He's actually quite critical of that term. He sees it as being too broad and often used to shame men for exhibiting traits that are actually natural and even essential for success.
So it's like saying that being strong or assertive is inherently bad.
He argues that those traits, while sometimes misdirected, can be incredibly powerful when channeled correctly. Think about ambition. Without ambition, we wouldn't have great leaders, innovators, or entrepreneurs. And without assertiveness, we wouldn't have the courage to stand up for what we believe in or to protect those we care about.
So it's not about suppressing those traits, but about learning how to use them responsibly.
Precisely. Riker points out that society sends men these very mixed messages. On the one hand, we're told to be vulnerable and in touch with our feelings, but on the other hand, we're often punished for showing weakness.
That's a tough double bind to be in. It's like we're setting men up to fail.
And that's exactly what Riker argues. He says that this double bind is contributing to the mental health crisis we're seeing among men. He points to the fact that men are far less likely to seek help for mental health issues and have much higher suicide rates.
Those are some pretty sobering statistics.
They are, and it underscores the importance of this conversation.
So what does Riker propose as a solution? How do men navigate this paradox?
He suggests that the key is emotional control. He's not advocating for suppressing emotions entirely, but he does believe that mastering your emotions rather than being ruled by them is crucial for men's well-being and success.
It's about being in control of your emotions, not letting them control you.
He uses some great examples from history to illustrate this point, like George Washington, known for his stoicism and resilience, or Winston Churchill, whose speeches rallied Britain during World War II. These were men who faced immense pressure, but were able to lead effectively because they master their emotions.
Those are some pretty powerful examples. It makes you think about the leaders we have today.
Hmm.
Do they possess that same level of emotional control?
That's a great question. And it's something I think we need to be asking ourselves more often. We tend to value charisma and eloquence, but maybe we should be looking for leaders who are calm, steady, and in command of themselves.
Now, I know Riker doesn't advocate for suppressing emotions entirely. So how does he reconcile this idea of emotional control with the need for vulnerability? Because we hear a lot about how men need to be more vulnerable these days.
He argues that vulnerability, when expressed within a framework of self-awareness and control, can be a strength, not a weakness. He uses the example of Tony Soprano from the TV show The Sopranos. On the one hand, he's a ruthless mob boss, but on the other hand, he's seeking therapy, struggling with panic attacks, and showing moments of vulnerability.
That's an interesting example. It's like he's saying that even the toughest guys can benefit from being vulnerable.
Exactly. But it's about finding that balance between strength and vulnerability. He points out that the media often sends men very conflicting messages about masculinity. On the one hand, we have this real men cry narrative, but on the other hand, we're bombarded with images of stoic heroes who never show weakness.
So how are men supposed to make sense of all these mixed messages?
Riker emphasizes the importance of self-awareness and developing mental toughness. He's a big proponent of practices like exercise mindfulness and even therapy as tools for building that resilience. He believes that men need to develop a strong sense of self so they're not swayed by every cultural trend or societal expectation.
So it's about knowing who you are, what you believe in, and what you stand for.
Exactly. And then having the mental fortitude to stay true to yourself, even when the world is telling you to be someone different.
This is all incredibly insightful. But before we wrap up this first part, I'm curious to hear what he has to say about the loneliness that often comes with leadership, because it seems like that's something a lot of men struggle with.
That's a great point, and it's something Riker addresses directly. He argues that leadership, by its very nature, often involves a sense of isolation. He uses Winston Churchill as an example, again pointing out that even this iconic leader who projected strength and confidence on the world stage battled depression.
Wow. So even the strongest among us can struggle with feelings of loneliness and isolation.
Riker's point is that it's part of the human experience, especially for those who are in positions of authority. And he suggests that part of being a strong leader is recognizing when you need support and being willing to seek it out.
It's that old saying, it's lonely at the top.
Exactly. But Riker argues that it doesn't have to be. He encourages men to build strong support networks, to surround themselves with people they trust, and to be willing to ask for help when they need it.
That's a powerful message. It reminds us that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of strength and self-awareness.
It's about recognizing that we're not meant to go through life alone. We need each other.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part. We've talked about the historical roots of masculinity, the challenges men face today, and the importance of emotional control, resilience, and connection. But Riker doesn't just focus on the problems. He also offers solutions.
Right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. He outlines a roadmap for men who are looking to build a more fulfilling life, and that's what we'll dive into in the next part. We'll explore the specific skills he believes are essential for effective leadership, how to navigate the complexities of modern relationships, and the importance of fatherhood and legacy.
This is all incredibly fascinating. Can't wait to hear more. So to our listeners, be sure to tune in for part 2, where we'll continue our deep dive into lock and lead.
Welcome back. It's great to be continuing our deep dive into lock and lead.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation. Riker's book has given me a lot to think about.
Me too. One of the things that struck me was his admiration for what he calls the masculine ancients. You know, those figures from ancient Greece and Rome.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. What is it about those ancient cultures that he finds so appealing?
He believes that they understood something fundamental about masculinity that we've lost sight of in modern society.
Like what?
Well, he argues that they saw strength, honor, and intellect as interconnected pillars of manhood. They weren't separate qualities, they were all part of a whole.
So it wasn't just about being physically strong. It was about character and intelligence as well.
Exactly. Take the Spartans, for example. They were known for their military prowess, of course,
Right?
but their society also placed a high value on discipline, loyalty, and a strong sense of duty. A man's worth wasn't just measured by his ability to fight, but by his commitment to his community and his adherence to a strict moral code.
It sounds like a very holistic view of masculinity, one that encompasses physical, mental, and moral strength. I can see how that would appeal to men today who are feeling lost or disillusioned with the modern definition of manhood.
And that's exactly Riker's point. He believes that we can learn a lot from these ancient cultures about how to be better men today.
So it's not about romanticizing the past or trying to go back in time. It's about extracting those timeless principles that are still relevant today.
Precisely. And one of those principles is leadership. Riker argues that the masculine ancients understood that true leadership isn't about dominance or aggression, but about service and responsibility.
That's a powerful distinction.
Mm?
It's not about power over others. It's about using your strength to protect and serve your community.
Exactly. He uses the term noblesse oblige to describe this concept. It's the idea that those who have power and privilege have a moral obligation to use it for the benefit of others. He sees this as a core principle of true masculinity.
It's a shame that we've lost sight of that in modern society. It seems like we've become so focused on individual rights that we've forgotten about our responsibilities to each other.
Riker agrees. He believes that we need to rediscover this sense of honor and duty if we want to create a more just and equitable society.
So how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we get back to this idea of leadership as service?
Riker believes it starts with recognizing the negative influences that are shaping our view of masculinity. He's very critical of how men are often portrayed in the media.
Yeah, like those stereotypical portrayals of men as either bumbling idiots or aggressive jerks.
Exactly. He points to examples like Homer Simpson, the incompetent father figure, or the overrepresentation of men as villains in movies and TV shows. He argues that these portrayals, while often meant to be humorous, contribute to a negative and distorted view of masculinity.
And it's not just the media, it's also the messages we get from society as a whole.
Mm.
There's this constant pressure on men to be successful, to be strong, to be stoic, and at the same time we're told to be sensitive and emotionally expressive. It's a no-win situation.
Riker calls it the double bind of masculinity. Men are damned if they do and damned if they don't.
So how do we break free from this double bind?
Riker believes that men need to reject these limiting narratives and focus on building their own identity based on those positive values of strength, honor, and responsibility. He argues that it's time for men to reclaim their masculinity and define it on their own terms.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
It's about taking control of the narrative and not letting society dictate who we should be.
And it's not just about reclaiming our own identity. It's about creating a better world for ourselves and for future generations. Riker believes that men have a vital role to play in shaping a more just and equitable society. But he argues that we can't do that if we're constantly being told that our masculinity is inherently toxic.
It's about recognizing that masculinity can be a force for good in the world. And it's about using our strength, our courage, and our compassion to make a positive difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about something Riker feels very strongly about: education. He's incredibly critical of the current education system, arguing that it's failing boys in particular.
Okay, that's interesting. What specifically is he concerned about?
Well, he believes that many schools have become hostile environments for boys. He points to a number of factors contributing to this problem.
Like what?
One is the decline in male teachers, especially in elementary schools. He believes that boys need strong male role models, particularly in those formative years.
Yeah, I've heard that argument before. It makes sense that boys would benefit from having more men in their lives, especially when they're young.
Riker argues that the lack of male teachers is contributing to a whole range of problems for boys, including lower academic achievement, behavioral issues, and a lack of self-esteem.
So it's not just about having someone to look up to. It's about having someone who understands the unique challenges that boys face.
Exactly. And Raker also points to the negative impact of zero-tolerance policies. He argues that these policies, while well-intentioned, often punish boys disproportionately for behaviors that are just part of normal male development. Things like being more physically active, more competitive, more prone to taking risks.
So it's like they're being punished for just being boys.
Essentially.
Uh,
He argues that we need to find a better way to discipline boys, one that takes into account their developmental needs and doesn't stifle their natural energy and exuberance.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's a fine line between allowing boys to be boys and letting them get away with bad behavior.
Riker acknowledges that. He's not saying that we should let boys run wild or excuse bad behavior, but he believes that we need to find a more balanced approach, one that recognizes the differences between boys and girls and tailors our discipline strategies accordingly.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between setting clear boundaries and allowing for some flexibility.
And he also criticizes the push for gender neutrality in schools. He believes that this movement, while well-intentioned, is actually harmful to both boys and girls.
In what way?
Well, he argues that it denies the biological and psychological differences between the sexes. He uses the example of banning rough play on playgrounds. While some might see it as aggressive, he argues that it's a natural way for boys to bond, learn social cues, and develop physical skills.
So he's saying that we shouldn't try to erase those differences, but rather understand them and create learning environments that cater to the unique needs of both boys and girls.
Exactly. He believes that by trying to make everyone the same, we're actually doing a disservice to everyone. We need to recognize that diversity is a strength, not a weakness.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
So if the current education system is failing boys, what does Riker propose as a solution?
He offers a number of suggestions. One is to create more single-sex schools, or at least single-sex classrooms within co-ed schools. He believes that this would allow boys to learn in an environment that's tailored to their specific needs.
That's an interesting idea. It's definitely something that's being debated a lot these days.
He also emphasizes the importance of having more male teachers, particularly in the early grades. He believed that boys need strong male role models in their lives, and that the lack of male teachers is contributing to the crisis of masculinity we're seeing today.
So it's not just about separating boys and girls. It's also about making sure that boys have positive male influences in their lives.
And he stresses the importance of physical activity. He believes that boys need an outlet for their energy, and that physical activity can help them develop disciplined teamwork and a sense of accomplishment.
So instead of trying to suppress their natural energy, we should be channeling it into something constructive.
Exactly. He suggests things like sports martial arts and outdoor adventures as ways to engage boys and help them thrive.
Those all sound like great ideas. But it seems like a lot of boys today are more interested in video games and social media than in physical activity.
Riker acknowledges that challenge, but he believes that we can make physical activity more appealing to boys by making it fun, competitive, and social. He suggests things like team sports adventure races and obstacle courses as ways to tap into boys' natural desire for challenge and camaraderie.
It's about making it an experience rather than a chore.
And he also stresses the importance of teaching boys about the benefits of physical activity. He believes that we need to move away from this idea that exercise is just about looking good and focus on the mental, emotional, and social benefits as well.
So it's about teaching them that taking care of their bodies is an act of self-respect and that it can actually make them happier and more successful in life.
Precisely. He argues that we need to help boys understand that physical strength is not just about muscles. It's about having the energy, the stamina, and the resilience to pursue their goals and overcome challenges.
That's a powerful message. It's about connecting physical strength to mental and emotional strength.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key theme in Riker's book, the importance of discipline.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about that a lot. What's his take on discipline?
He sees it as the bedrock of masculinity, arguing that it's essential for men to achieve their full potential. He defines discipline as the ability to control your impulses, delay gratification, and persevere in the face of adversity. It's about having the self-control to make choices that align with your values and goals, even when it's difficult.
It sounds like a tall order in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with temptations and distractions.
Riker acknowledges that, but he believes that discipline is more important now than ever. He argues that we're living in a culture of instant gratification, where everything is available at our fingertips. And that's making it harder for men to develop the patience, the perseverance, and the self-control they need to succeed.
So how do we cultivate discipline in a world that seems designed to distract us?
Riker offers a number of practical suggestions. One is to set clearer goals and then create a plan to achieve those goals. He emphasizes the importance of breaking down large goals into smaller, more manageable steps. He also recommends creating a daily routine that includes time for work, for relationships, for personal growth, and for relaxation. He believes that having a structure to your day can help you stay focused and avoid distractions.
It's about creating those good habits that help you stay on track.
And he stresses the importance of holding yourself accountable. He suggests tracking your progress, journaling your thoughts and feelings, and seeking feedback from trusted mentors or friends.
It's about being honest with yourself about where you're at and where you want to be.
And he also recommends finding ways to make discipline more enjoyable. He suggests finding an activity you enjoy that requires discipline, whether it's a sport, a hobby, or a creative pursuit.
It's about finding something that motivates you and makes you want to push yourself.
He believes that when you enjoy the process, discipline becomes less of a chore and more of a source of satisfaction. Now, another key concept Riker emphasizes is decisiveness. He believes that the ability to make decisions quickly and confidently is essential for success in all areas of life.
I can see how that would be important, especially for leaders.
Exactly. Riker argues that leaders who are indecisive or who second-guess themselves constantly lose the respect of their followers. He also points out that procrastination is often a form of fear. We put off making decisions because we're afraid of making the wrong choice.
So how do we overcome that fear and become more decisive?
Riker suggests a number of strategies. One is to set a deadline for making a decision. He believes that having a time constraint can help you focus your mind and avoid overthinking. He also recommends gathering all the information you need before making a decision. Once you have all the facts, you can weigh your options and make a choice based on logic and reason.
But what if you don't have all the information? What if you're facing a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty?
Riker acknowledges that this is a common challenge. He suggests trusting your intuition in those situations. He believes that we often have a gut feeling about what the right decision is, even if we can't articulate it logically. He also recommends seeking advice from trusted mentors or advisors, but ultimately he believes that you have to make the decision and then move forward. Don't get bogged down in second-guessing yourself.
So it's about being willing to take risks and accept the consequences.
Exactly. Riker argues that decisiveness is a muscle that gets stronger with use. The more decisions you make, the more confident you'll become in your ability to make good choices.
It's like anything else. The more you practice, the better you get.
Now let's talk about a quality that's closely related to decisiveness: courage. Riker believes that courage is essential for men to live a life of purpose and meaning.
Courage is definitely a quality that's always been associated with masculinity. But what does Riker mean by courage?
He defines courage as the ability to face your fears and do what's right even when it's difficult. He argues that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over fear. It's about acknowledging your fears but not letting them control you.
So it's not about being fearless. It's about being willing to act despite your fears.
Exactly. He uses the example of firefighters who run into burning buildings to save lives, or soldiers who put themselves in harm's way to protect their country. These are people who are afraid, but they don't let their fear paralyze them.
It's about that higher purpose that motivates them to act even when it's dangerous.
And Riker believes that we all have the capacity for courage. It's not just reserved for heroes or extraordinary individuals. He argues that we can cultivate courage in our own lives by facing our fears one step at a time. It might be something small, like speaking up in a meeting when you have an idea, or it might be something bigger, like starting your own business or asking someone out on a date.
So it's about pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and challenging yourself to grow.
And he emphasizes the importance of finding your own definition of courage. What might be courageous for one person might not be courageous for another. It's about identifying what you're afraid of and then taking action to overcome those fears.
It's about owning your fears and not letting them hold you back from living a full and meaningful life.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another important aspect of Riker's philosophy: the importance of honor.
Honor is definitely a word that we don't hear a lot these days. It seems like it's gone out of fashion.
Riker argues that honor is more important now than ever. He defines honor as a deep sense of integrity, a commitment to doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. It's about having a strong moral compass and living by your principles. He sees it as the foundation of trust, respect, and strong relationships.
So it's about being a man of your word.
Yeah,
Someone who can be trusted to do the right thing.
exactly. He believes that honor is essential for creating a just and equitable society. He uses the example of the ancient Romans who placed a high value on honor. They believed that a man's word was his bond and that breaking a promise was a grave offense.
That's a pretty high standard. It seems like we've gotten away from that in modern society, where everything is so transactional and people are always looking out for themselves.
Riker believes that we need to rediscover the importance of honor if we want to create a better world. He argues that it starts with each of us taking personal responsibility for our actions and living by a code of ethics. He suggests things like being honest in your dealings, keeping your promises, and treating others with respect even when they don't deserve it.
It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is watching.
Precisely. He argues that honor is not about seeking recognition or praise. It's doing what's right because it's the right thing to do.
It's about having that inner compass that guides your actions. And it's about setting an example for others to follow.
And Riker believes that honor is particularly important for men because it's so closely tied to masculinity. He argues that throughout history, men have been called upon to be the protectors, the providers, and the leaders, and those roles require a strong sense of honor.
So it's about living up to those expectations and being the kind of man that others can look up to.
He suggests that men can cultivate honor in their lives by being truthful, by being reliable, by keeping their promises, and by standing up for what they believe in, even when it's unpopular.
It sounds like a challenging path, but also a rewarding one.
He believes that living a life of honor is ultimately the most fulfilling path. It's about having a clear conscience, knowing that you've done your best to live up to your values. Now, another key aspect of Riker's philosophy is the importance of resilience. He defines resilience as the ability to bounce back from adversity, overcome challenges, and emerge stronger from difficult experiences.
Resilience is definitely a quality that's been getting a lot of attention lately.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone is talking about the importance of being resilient.
And for good reason. We're living in a world that's increasingly complex and unpredictable. We're facing challenges that our ancestors could never have imagined, and we need to be resilient if we're going to thrive in this new environment.
So how do we cultivate resilience? Is it something we're born with, or is it something we can learn?
Riker believes that resilience is a combination of nature and nurture. He points to the biological basis of resilience, arguing that testosterone, the male hormone, plays a role in our ability to handle stress. But he also emphasizes the importance of developing resilience through experience. He believes that we build resilience by facing challenges, overcoming obstacles, and learning from our mistakes.
So it's about pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone and not being afraid to fail.
Exactly. He argues that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a necessary part of the journey. He encourages men to embrace failure as an opportunity to learn and grow.
It's about that growth mindset that we talked about earlier. It's about believing that you can always improve and that setbacks are just temporary bumps in the road.
And he offers a number of practical suggestions for building resilience. He emphasizes the importance of physical fitness, arguing that exercise strengthens not only our bodies, but also our minds. He recommends activities like weightlifting, running, and martial arts, which challenge us physically and mentally, pushing us to overcome our limits.
So it's not just about looking good. It's about building that inner strength and fortitude.
And he also stresses the importance of positive self-talk, of reframing negative thoughts and focusing on our strengths. He suggests keeping a gratitude journal where you write down things you're grateful for each day. He believes that this can help shift your focus from what's wrong to what's right in your life.
It's about cultivating an attitude of gratitude and optimism.
And he encourages us to surround ourselves with positive people who support our goals and believe in our potential. He argues that the people we spend time with have a profound impact on our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors.
It's about choosing your tribe wisely.
Exactly. Now let's talk about something that's essential for resilience connection. Riker believes that strong social connections are vital for men's well-being. He argues that men need other men in their lives. Men, they can trust men, they can rely on men, they can share their experiences with.
We've talked about the crisis of loneliness that many men are facing today. It seems like it's harder than ever for men to find those deep, meaningful connections.
Riker agrees. He blames a number of factors for this, including the decline of traditional communities, the rise of social media, and the increasing pressure on men to be stoic and self-reliant.
It's like we're being told to be strong and independent, but then we're punished for actually needing each other.
Exactly. Riker argues that this is a recipe for disaster. He believes that men need to reject the idea that they have to go it alone and instead embrace the power of brotherhood.
So how do we build those strong connections with other men? It seems like it's not always easy, especially in today's world.
Riker offers a number of suggestions. One is to join a men's group. He believes that these groups provide a safe and supportive space for men to connect, share their experiences, and learn from each other. He also recommends finding a mentor, an older man who can offer guidance and wisdom. And he stresses the importance of making time for friendships. He suggests scheduling regular outings with friends, whether it's for coffee, a hike, or a sporting event.
It's about making those connections a priority in your life.
And he also encourages men to be more open and vulnerable with each other. He believes that men need to learn how to express their emotions and ask for help when they need it.
So it's about breaking down those walls of stoicism and creating a culture of support and understanding.
Exactly. Now let's move on to another important theme in Riker's book, The Pursuit of Excellence. He defines excellence as a relentless commitment to self-improvement, a striving for mastery in all areas of life.
It sounds like a high bar to set. Is he talking about being perfect?
No, he's not advocating for perfection. He acknowledges that no one is perfect and that we all make mistakes. But he believes that we should always strive to be our best selves, to constantly learn and grow, and to never stop pushing ourselves to improve.
It's about that growth mindset that we talked about earlier.
He uses the example of Theodore Roosevelt, who overcame numerous challenges in his life to become a successful author, explorer, soldier, and politician. Roosevelt was a sickly child who was not expected to live long, but he defied the odds through sheer willpower and determination.
That's a pretty inspiring example.
And Riker argues that Roosevelt's life is a testament to the power of excellence. He believes that we all have the potential to achieve great things if we're willing to set high standards for ourselves and work hard to achieve them.
So how do we cultivate excellence in our own lives? Where do we start?
Riker suggests starting with your values. What's important to you? What do you believe in? What do you want to stand for? Once you've identified your values, you can use them as a guide to make decisions and set goals.
So it's about aligning your actions with your values.
And he also stresses the importance of finding your passion. What do you love to do? What are you good at? What makes you feel alive? He believes that when you're passionate about something, you're more likely to excel at it.
It's about finding that thing that lights you up and then pursuing it with all your heart.
And he also recommends seeking out mentors and role models, people who have achieved excellence in areas that you admire. He believes that learning from others is one of the fastest ways to improve.
So it's about surrounding yourself with people who inspire you and challenge you to be your best self.
Exactly. Now let's talk about something that might seem a bit counterintuitive at first, the power of silence. In today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, silence can seem like a luxury we can't afford.
It's true. We're always connected, always on, always plugged in. It can be hard to find a moment of peace and quiet.
But Raker argues that silence is essential for men's well-being. He believes that men need time to disconnect from the noise of the world, to reflect, to recharge, and to reconnect with their inner selves.
So it's about creating those moments of solitude where you can just be with your own thoughts.
He suggests practices like meditation, mindfulness, and spending time in nature as ways to cultivate silence in your life. He also recommends setting boundaries around technology use. For example, he suggests turning off your phone and computer for a few hours each day, or designating certain times as technology-free zones.
It's about taking control of your technology instead of letting it control you.
And he also stresses the importance of silence in communication. He argues that we often talk too much and listen too little. He suggests practicing active listening, where you focus on truly hearing what the other person is saying without interrupting or judging.
It's about being present in the moment and giving the other person your full attention.
And he also recommends using silence strategically in conversations. He suggests pausing before you speak to gather your thoughts and to allow the other person to process what you've said.
It's about using silence as a tool to enhance communication rather than as a way to avoid it.
Exactly. Now let's talk about a quality that's closely related to silence presence. Riker defines presence as the ability to command attention, to inspire respect, and to make others feel seen and heard.
It's like that magnetic quality that some people have. They walk into a room and everyone notices.
He argues that presence is not about being loud or domineering. It's about having a quiet confidence, a sense of self-assurance that draws people in.
So it's about being comfortable in your own skin and projecting an aura of authenticity.
Exactly. He believes that presence is a skill that can be developed through practice. He suggests paying attention to your body language, standing up straight, making eye contact, and speaking clearly and confidently. He also recommends practicing public speaking, which can help you become more comfortable commanding attention.
And he stresses the importance of being present in the moment. He argues that when you're fully engaged in what you're doing, whether it's having a conversation, listening to music, or simply enjoying a meal, you naturally project an aura of presence. So it's about being mindful and appreciating the little things in life.
Now let's move on to one of the final themes in Riker's book, The Importance of Legacy. He defines legacy as the impact you have on the world. the mark you leave behind. He believes that every man has the potential to create a legacy, something that will outlive him and make a positive difference in the world.
So it's about more than just achieving success in your own life. It's about leaving a lasting contribution to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. He argues that creating a legacy gives your life meaning and purpose. It's about making a difference, contributing to something bigger than yourself, and leaving the world a better place than you found it.
So how do we create a legacy? What are some of the things we can do?
Riker suggests a number of ways to create a legacy. One is to raise good children. He believes that being a father is one of the most important and rewarding ways to leave a mark on the world. He also encourages men to mentor younger men to share their wisdom and experience and to help them become the best versions of themselves.
It's about paying it forward and investing in the next generation.
He also suggests getting involved in your community, volunteering your time and talents to support causes you believe in, and he encourages men to create something, whether it's a work of art, a business, a book, or a new invention. He believes that creative expression is one of the most powerful ways to leave a lasting impact on the world.
So it's about finding your own unique way to contribute to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. Now let's talk about one final theme that Riker emphasizes: the importance of adventure. He defines adventure as the pursuit of challenges and experiences that push us outside of our comfort zone. He believes that adventure is essential for men's well-being. It helps us to grow, to learn to test our limits, and to discover our true potential.
I can see how that would be appealing. It's about breaking out of the routine and experiencing something new and exciting.
Exactly. He argues that adventure doesn't have to be something grand or dangerous. It can be as simple as trying a new hobby, taking a road trip, or learning a new language. He believes that the key is to find something that challenges you, that makes you feel alive, and that helps you grow as a person.
So it's about embracing the unknown and stepping outside of your comfort zone.
He suggests making a list of things you've always wanted to do but have been afraid to try, and then start checking them off one by one. He believes that by pushing ourselves to try new things, we discover hidden talents and passions, and we create a more interesting and fulfilling life for ourselves.
It's about embracing life to the fullest.
And he argues that adventure is particularly important for men because it helps us to connect with our primal instincts. He believes that deep down, men are still hunters and explorers. We crave challenge, we crave excitement, and we crave the feeling of accomplishment that comes from overcoming obstacles.
So it's about tapping into that primal energy and using it to create a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
And that's what Lock and Lead is all about. It's a call to action for men to embrace their masculinity, to define it on their own terms, and to create a life of purpose, meaning, and adventure. It's a book that's sure to challenge you, inspire you, and empower you to become the best man you can be. So we've spent the last two parts really unpacking Conrad Riker's Lock and Lead. A lot to digest, right?
There is. It's a dense book, but I think it speaks to something a lot of men are feeling right now.
Yeah.
You know, that sense of being lost, like the old roadmap for manhood has been torn up, and we're not sure where to go next.
You nailed it. And I think that's where Riker's optimism comes in. Because he doesn't just leave us with a diagnosis. He offers a vision for the future.
So what does that future look like? What's his prescription for men moving forward?
Well, he starts by challenging this narrative that masculinity is inherently toxic.
Yep, that's a big one these days. Seems like everywhere you turn, masculinity is being blamed for everything wrong in the world.
And Riker pushes back hard on that. He argues that masculinity, when channeled properly, is actually a force for good. It's about strength.
Yeah.
But it's also about responsibility, about protecting and providing for others, about building and creating, about leading with courage and integrity.
It's interesting because he doesn't shy away from the shadow side of masculinity either. You know, the aggression, the dominance, the tendency towards violence.
Yeah, right. He acknowledges those tendencies, but he argues that they can be redirected, channeled into something positive. He uses the analogy of a wild horse. You can't just break a wild horse. You have to tame it, train it, harness its power for something useful.
So it's about taking those raw masculine urges and transforming them into something that benefits both the man and society as a whole.
Exactly. And a big part of that transformation is about connection. He argues that men need other men in their lives, supportive, trustworthy men who will challenge them, hold them accountable, and help them become the best versions of themselves.
Which is ironic because that's the one thing our culture seems to discourage these days.
Right. It's like we've bought into this myth of the self-made man, the lone wolf who doesn't need anyone. But Riker argues that that's a recipe for disaster. Men need brotherhood. They need camaraderie. They need to feel like they're part of something larger than themselves.
It's like we've forgotten the power of the tribe.
And that's where he sees a lot of hope for the future. He's a big advocate for men's groups, for mentorship programs, for creating those spaces where men can come together and support each other.
It's funny because I think a lot of men are craving that. They're hungry for that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose,
Yeah.
but they don't know where to find it.
And that's where Riker's work is so valuable, because he's not just pointing out the problems, he's offering solutions.
So it's not just a critique of modern masculinity, it's a guidebook for how to be a better man in today's world.
And another key part of that is being willing to adapt.
Because, let's face it, the world is changing rapidly, and those old models of masculinity just don't work anymore.
Right. And Riker acknowledges that. He encourages men to be lifelong learners, to embrace new experiences, to step outside of their comfort zones. He says that men need to be adaptable, flexible,
Yeah.
open to change.
It's about being willing to let go of those old, rigid ideas of what it means to be a man and embrace a more fluid, more dynamic definition.
And to do that, you need confidence.
Because without confidence, you're going to get swept away by every cultural trend or societal pressure.
Exactly. He argues that men need to develop a strong sense of self, a clear understanding of their values and their purpose, and then they need to lead with confidence, not arrogance, but that quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for.
So it's about finding your own path, your own way of being a man in the world, and then walking that path with courage and conviction.
And that's ultimately what Riker's book is all about. It's a call to action for men to step up, to embrace their full potential, to create a better future for themselves and for generations to come.
It's a powerful message, and I think it's one that a lot of men are ready to hear.
I agree. I think there's a real hunger out there for this kind of guidance, and I think Riker's book is a valuable resource for men who are looking to find their way in a world that can often feel confusing and even hostile.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I have to say, I've learned a lot, and I think our listeners will too. So to everyone listening, if you're looking for a roadmap for navigating the challenges of modern masculinity, I highly recommend checking out Conrad Riker's Lock and Lead. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you and to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another thought-provoking conversation.